Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us on this kickoff webinar hosted by Indiva Advisors. I'm excited to be here. I am Jessica Velasquez, founder and CEO of Indiva Advisors, a boutique CPA firm focused on the cannabis industry located in Las Vegas. And I'm very excited to talk about today's topic, this taxation transformation, as to what a world with cannabis rescheduled or descheduled could look like. And I am joined here by my wonderful guests, Naomi Granger and Josephine Giordano. I will let them introduce themselves and I will hand it off to Naomi.
Hey, thank you so much. So happy to be here and happy to see a lot of Vegas people representing Las Vegas. I am Naomi Granger. I'm the founder of the National Association of Cannabis Accounting and Tax Professionals. I am a CPA and I have been working in the cannabis industry for the last 7 years now. Your turn, Josephine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Jessica. And Naomi, great to see you again. My name is Josephine Giordano. I am with Beach Fleischman. We are Arizona's largest locally owned CPA firm. I've been in the cannabis space for about 6 years now. My background is a little different. I'm more in the areas of valuation, litigation support, restructuring, forensic accounting in those particular areas, but the firm does provide services in audit, tax, accounting, and other service areas as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you both ladies for that introduction and for joining me today in this, what I think is going to be an exciting conversation around taxation and what that could look like for cannabis with a potential reschedule or deschedule. And I'd like to also kind of talk about the recent news around TrueLeaf and what is a $113 million actual cash tax refund. I know I've been getting a lot of questions on that, so I'd love to talk about that and see what your guys' thoughts are.
When was the last time you got a $100 million tax refund, Jessica? Just curious. Personally? No?
Exactly. Yeah, I wish that was my bank.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, happy to kick us off here. And really, we're going to be talking about descheduling and rescheduling, as I mentioned. But I'd love to really just set the stage. Where are we today? What has brought us here to this conversation? And then open up the dialogue with my guests and talk about what's on people's minds, questions that we received from clients, and frankly, just even questions of our own that we've had over the last couple of months. And so I think with that, we all know that cannabis is federally illegal. It is Schedule 1 on the CSA. And for that reason, it is subject to a very punitive tax code called 280E, which again, hopefully if you're an operator and you're in the industry, you're familiar with this impact of 280E and what it does to your ultimate tax liability and frankly, the bottom line and operations of your business, right? So with that in mind, I did want to just kind of set us off. So last summer, I think around in August, the Department of Health formally recommended to the DEA that cannabis be removed from Schedule 1 and possibly rescheduled to Schedule 3, right? So we caught that news late summer last year. And it has been a pretty big buzz, I would say, in the cannabis taxation world as to, again, what that means, what it could look like. So again, to set the stage, what does descheduling look like? So it would move from level 1 to a proposed level 3 under this recommendation. And what does descheduling mean? What does that look like? So that means it would go from a Schedule 1 to just completely off of the CSA. It would not be in any of the schedules currently there. So rescheduling and descheduling. Just wanted to make sure the attendees have a baseline there. But fast forward now. So what could a world look like if cannabis is rescheduled from 1 to 3? What does that world look like? And I'm going to hand it off to Naomi to kick us off. And again, ladies, let's just have a conversation here.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so thanks for giving us that quick overview of rescheduling and descheduling. And so the proposal was that the cannabis would be rescheduled to Schedule 3. Now, the problem with that is cannabis is the only drug on the scheduling that has an adult use application. And so if you think about what rescheduling and descheduling is, descheduling is something like alcohol and tobacco. Those are adult use substances that you can go into any store and purchase and use them. But with anything that's on the schedule, currently you need to have a prescription. Well, we all know that the cannabis industry has an adult use application. Anybody above the age of 21 can walk into a dispensary and buy the product without a prescription. So there raises the question, will it turn into a pharmaceutical? And if it does, then that's going to cause a myriad of financial issues and problems and redoing the entire programs for all these states. And so right now, we don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like.
I can't, it's hard to even imagine like monolithic pharmaceutical companies involved in this industry, but I guess that's something that could come down the pike at some point. I mean, what I'm envisioning, and I come from a bankruptcy background, insolvency, restructuring, and because companies in this industry have not been able to obtain protection from the bankruptcy world and bankruptcy court, that's something that hopefully we're heading toward that direction, because the
no, she froze.
Yeah, well, she'll come back here in a second.
Well, I think I know which direction she's going with. Another thing that's going to open up if it's rescheduled is banking and finance and having access to capital and being able to walk into a bank and having access to government programs. With cannabis being the highest taxpayer in the country, they should be able to use the programs that our taxpayer dollars are paying for, but currently they don't have access to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Naomi. I think from a taxation standpoint, 280E will go away for sure. Again, 280E specifically impacts Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 of CSA folks. And so again, cannabis coming from a 1 to a possible 3 would change that tax environment. And 280E would no longer apply. So I think in general, folks might say that's fantastic news and really kind of rejoice in this punitive tax law going away. But I suspect that there's going to be some other taxes that are going to replace it, or just be a part of that new scheduling program. Like, for example, federal excise taxes, like what we see on cigarettes and other products. So again, I don't think it's a free for all in terms of we get now this huge tax benefit. I do think the world is going to look different in terms of what taxation structure could either replace it or be a part of the structure. I think you pointed out earlier, spot on, Naomi, that we have this industry that has a combined medical and adult use programming. And so I do think that will be a challenge. I mean, we've not even touched like interstate commerce and what's going to happen there possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully with the 280E taxes going away, there's no additional tax that kind of supplements that, and now we're back in the same spot. So we would love for the rescheduling to provide some relief for our operators. And so being able to write off more of your operating expenses and have a lower tax bill, then you can do more with the dollars that are coming into your business and grow your business. And also being able to have access to capital, you can do more. And then also, we haven't talked about how is that even going to be rolled out? We don't know. Are they going to make it retroactive, meaning that it's effective? Well, it depends on what the effective date is. It going to be effective January 1, 2024? Is it going to be effective since the beginning of you started your business? Is it going to be effective sometime in the future, January 1, 2025? We don't know how that's going to look. And so then there's going to need to be a lot of planning around that, because we've got to have some strong cutoff controls in place to make sure we're not pushing all our revenue into that effective period. And so there's just a lot of planning that needs to be done around that.
Josephine, I know you're coming back. Welcome back. But we're touching on again. Touching again on what a world without or with rescheduling looks like.
Yes, and so what I was saying is, it's from my perspective, these companies that are in distress, the relief of 280E implications would have a major impact on these companies, and maybe allow them then to kind of get from underneath any creditors or any credit issues that they might be having, waiting for federal legalization so that it could open itself up to the federal bankruptcy laws and the courts, for those companies to be able to use those protections.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Hale here in our chat, again, kind of threw a good message here in terms of his thoughts on what the feds are going to do. I kind of agree with you, Ryan, frankly. I just don't see the federal government completely doing away with 280E and not having an offset. Generally speaking, when Congress passes tax law, they have to have a balanced budget. So whether it's tax increases or decreases, there's a budget behind that that they need to prove to. And so I don't know. I don't see them just walking away from 280E without some other taxation structure to gain back some of that revenue that's going to be lost.
Well, you would hope that they have somebody in the room that helps them understand that there's illegal sales going on, and the more they tax the legal businesses, the less money, the less opportunity they have to bring in a lot of these legacy operators into the legal market. So it could, even if the taxes decrease for the current operators, if they're able to transition more legacy to legal through this program over the years, at the end, there could be a bigger tax benefit to the government.
And I'm right there with both of you. I totally agree that I don't envision, although I don't have any connection to the political arena to know what they're thinking, but I don't envision that with 280E going away, that there wouldn't be some other level of tax to kind of offset. But let's hope it's smaller than what they're dealing with right now, and hopefully allow them to have a better cash flow to be able to move forward and build their businesses.
Speaking of cash flow, that was a great transition, Josephine. So, yeah, what's up with $113 million cash refund that Trulieve received from the IRS? This, again, has been a topic that's been on a lot of folks' mind. And I know I've gotten a lot of questions the last couple of weeks, particularly as we gear up for tax filing season, right? We have the first deadline upon us this Friday. So clients are wanting to know how did Trulieve get this refund? What are they doing on 280E that I need to be thinking about? And is this the right thing for us to do and consider. So maybe kicking it off to Josephine first, what are your thoughts on this Trulieve refund news?
Yeah, I don't think, unless I'm missing something, I don't see any detail out there as to what comprises that refund. I know I did see a couple of videos from the CEO where she discussed, where she talked about the refunds, but there's no specific kind of magic potion or something that she's disclosing to the public. I think because there's potential litigation that might be involved down the road, not necessarily right now, but that might encompass these refunds. So I think they need to kind of keep a low profile and tight-lipped about their strategies. But I know they did have some rejections on a couple of $1 million that were rejected, but I'd love to see the detail behind that. What was the detail behind the rejections? What was the detail behind the refunds? Was it all federal, or was some of that? I don't know if they even specifically said whether or not they were state refunds, federal refunds. Do you recall reading about that, if it had to do with sales tax or anything to that effect?
It's right here. All of the goodies are posted right here in this MJ Biz article that we've pulled up here on the screen. So they're currently seeking $31 million in state tax refunds, but the 113 is specific to federal income tax. So they received $62 million of that in Q4 of last year. They received another 50.3 in January, making total refunds received 113 million. And I want to say it was in this article or maybe another article that I read, but they actually called it the secret sauce. Or someone I saw.
Secret.
Go ahead, Naomi.
Yeah, so they said that they're not going to disclose much because of possible litigation, and they're calling it a trade secret. But my background, I introduced myself at the beginning. I have 12 years in public accounting doing external audits. So I know how to read a financial statement. So I decided to open up their 10K and take a look at it and see, because I know when I was there, we had to disclose these types of things. You can't just put $100 million on the books and not talk about it in your 10K. So I took a look at the 10K, but they really are not saying anything in their 10K about where this 113 million came from. But an interesting thing that I noticed when I opened the 10K that nobody is talking about is they had $300 million of impairments of their goodwill. So I'm going to look into that. I know that wasn't part of today's discussion, but that's a lot of movement.
Absolutely. I mean, again, going back to the article, they did mention 180 million approximately in uncertain tax positions, also acronym UTP for the financial statement folks out there. But that is a liability on their balance sheet. And so they are reserving. That's essentially a reserve, right, in case that the IRS would come back or an audit would presume, or litigation or what have you, or potentially the refunds that they've have filed for could have to go back. And so again, they did reserve that as required by financial statement purposes. But still, I really have not heard of cannabis companies getting refunds. First of all, let's just start there. Refunds for any of their prior 280E filings or positions on tax returns. If anything, we're seeing audits and it's more tax liability that's being owed than originally filed. So I guess we're going to have to wait for this trade secret, as they called it, to come out and kind of appear and show itself. But I do think it's a conversation worth having for the folks that are online, with a professional, making sure that you understand risk, reward and frankly, the 280E position that you currently have right now, which I think is again, really important. Anything else you ladies want to add on the TrueLeaf refund matter?
I mean, the only thing I would say is we're probably going to see the MSOs, maybe we'll see another, large MSO, come out with a press release to the same effect. So, maybe the secret sauce is getting spread around at the larger company level. But, hopefully sometime soon we'll all be in the know and, know what it is that it would be applicable, for the IRS and to get refunds in this situation.
Yeah, very interesting. That's for sure. And again, I think to your point, Josephine, I'm curious to see if there's a domino effect by the MSOs. Certainly they have more cash and investment dollars to possibly litigate this matter all the way through tax court. But I know it's a probably different position for some of the non-MSO operators that are running their business, trying to keep the lights on, make some money after paying the tax bill. So maybe bringing us back to rescheduling or descheduling. And we started to talk about this at the top of the webinar here, but what other things should we be thinking about or discussing with clients and operators as we move into this world? So Josephine, if you want to kick us off on this one.
Sure. I mean, I think what we'll start to see, I mean, once we get a little deeper into it and we do get rescheduled to a 3, because I think it will happen. It's just a question of when. It might not be this year, but it certainly, I think, will eventually happen. And I think the effects are really broad. I mean, we could talk about banking. Banking probably will start to open up a little bit more. We should see that. I mean, we'll likely see credit card companies perhaps getting involved. I don't know if they're going to wait for actual federal legalization. I know they did when they kind of entered the Canadian market. Once that became federally legal, you had Amex, Visa, MasterCard involved. So I think you'll start to see a lot more open up for these companies, lending opportunities, better interest rates, hopefully, with possible lending vehicles so that they can, have the luxuries, if you will, of what other operators in non-cannabis space, are able to work with to, have their company succeed.
Naomi?
Yeah, and so something that we kind of mentioned, but we haven't really discussed yet is the possibility of interstate commerce opening up and what that can possibly do to the industry. I'm here, we're in Las Vegas, and in order to grow product in Las Vegas, you have to have an indoor grow. They have special water tanks with special chemicals in there to make sure that the water is perfect and everything has to be perfectly done. And it's very expensive to grow in the middle of the desert, as opposed to somewhere in Northern California or Oregon, where they can just have an outdoor grow and just, let it rain and water the plants that way. So the product is it's going to be much cheaper if interstate commerce opens up. What is that going to do to the existing operators who are in these states that have to have specialized equipment in place just to be able to grow that product?
Oh man, that one's literally like the $1 million bomb, Naomi. Obviously, opening up interstate commerce, we can move product across state lines without restriction, possibly. We don't know what that looks like, but assuming that it is, that could really change the course for a lot of cannabis operators, depending on the market even that you're in. Finding that cost per gram becomes even more important as we lead up to any of these types of changes. Really, I think understanding your profitability, break-even concepts cash flow projections, things outside of just 280E and paying taxes. I think you ladies nailed it. It's definitely a broader business thought process to think about, because it's not just taxes. Again, if interstate commerce opens up, you're now competing with every other cannabis operator in the U.S., assuming that that's how that plays out.
And that could be, that's like a double-edged sword as well. You know, I mean, it's good and it's bad. I mean, interstate commerce, you know, could result in the flooding of markets, which we don't want to see. We don't want to see prices driven down by that. But I think how it'll get compensated is through some type of tariffs, or, you know, import-export tariffs or something like that to control what's crossing the state lines. So there's going to have to be, you know, some really good thought involved in the process, and what can and can't be done, and what states are going to participate, you know, or if all states are going to participate, how they're going to control the demand and the supply.
I think you're right, Josephine, in that it's a double-edged sword. Again, I hear a lot of operators rejoicing in this potential reschedule or even deschedule where 280E goes away. But we need to think about what's going to come in when 280E goes away. And what you just said in terms of tariffs and excise taxes amongst states to control the movement of cannabis is something that could be likely. Again, I don't know if we just rip the whole Band-Aid off, or if it's going to be a patchwork of Band-Aids that gets us through this process. But certainly interstate commerce should be on top of people's mind. And maybe to that effect, certainly ensuring that your legislatures, your legislators, I should say, folks that are in Congress that could possibly make a decision on this, that they hear what your concerns are, and that they're hearing from the operators and other cannabis constituents as to what you would want to happen in possibly this new world of either rescheduling or descheduling. I did want to take this question from Casey Watson. So her question is, how is rescheduling or descheduling different from a tax perspective? Naomi, did you want to take this one? And I'm happy to chime in here.
I'm not the tax person.
I'm happy to take it.
Yeah, and in my opinion, if 280E goes away, I feel like both is going to make 280E go away, but who knows what else is going to come from either direction you go.
That's the right answer, Naomi. And so Casey, in both scenarios of rescheduling or descheduling, because 280E would officially, or excuse me, cannabis would officially come off of a Schedule 1, 280E would go away in either instance. So hopefully that answers your question. But I do think all these other concepts that we're talking about would apply in both worlds of either rescheduling or descheduling that we would need to consider and think about.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the descheduling would have a harder push towards some of those other areas that we talked about, like for banking. Certainly, banking will lighten up with a rescheduling, but I think it will really lighten up and be ready to service the industry if it were descheduled. Just like the same thing with credit cards. I think descheduling completely, federal legalization would kind of set us on a faster path for the industry to grow and move forward. I mean, but this is certainly, this will certainly have a big impact as well.
That's another positive upside here in rescheduling or descheduling, just access to financing, access to, capital, public or otherwise, possibly. What do you think about seeing some cannabis operators list on possibly the U.S. stock exchange or NASDAQ, or, they don't have to go to Canada anymore? I don't know.
Something to watch. Certainly something to watch.
Absolutely. So again, besides these items, financing, banking, we talked about interstate commerce, other taxation structures. From a business perspective, what would you say is some good takeaways for cannabis owners and operators to keep in mind as we move into this new uncharted land?
Well, one of the things I've been suggesting to my clients, because, I come from a business valuation background, clients I have, not just in cannabis, but most clients want to know, how do I get from here to there, either in some type of exit planning, exit strategy. So what I always suggest is kind of run your projections, because they should be working with cash flow forecasting right now. But maybe run those same forecasts in this different world that we're talking about. What could it potentially look like? What would it potentially look like on your cash flow forecast if you could pay down debt, if you have money available for employee benefits, different things that will help the industry and your company grow. Run those numbers, kind of work with them, maybe use some assumptions that there is a federal tax or some other tax ramification outside of the 280E issue, and see if you can incorporate that into your cash flow forecasting to see, where can you be in the next 5 years, if things were to change, from what they are right now.
Josephine, do you mind adding your thoughts on what bankruptcy could look like in this new world?
Yeah, I mean, bankruptcy protection is a big deal, I think. We see a lot of distressed companies, not just in cannabis, but, distressed companies having the ability to file for bankruptcy and restructure, I think, is a big deal. Sometimes they just need to have that protection there to be able to reorganize and restructure their debts to be able to move forward. Right now, cannabis companies don't have that. So I think it would make a huge impact to be able to know that you can have that protection at some time, in the future.
Absolutely. Naomi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we kind of mentioned this earlier, that they should be able to have access to these government programs that protect businesses, because they are paying taxes into the federal government to support these types of programs.
I mean, even the SBA funding, during COVID, right? I mean, that was that was a government program to help companies during a really difficult time. And cannabis companies didn't have that luxury, so they had to pivot and figure out different ways to be able to get through the pandemic. So it's things like that that make it really difficult, in addition to everything else, in operating in this space. So the more we can open up on all these different fronts, banking, credit cards, bankruptcy protection, all those different things, lending, I think we just help our clients and the industry to grow into the future.
Yeah. Two of the items that come to mind from a tax planning perspective is again, kind of one, getting your initial or current 280E position really locked down so that you're putting yourself in the most advantageous of places from a tax liability in advance of this potential rescheduling coming down the pike. So possibly taking advantage of 471C, right? And if you are looking to do something like that, filing a change in accounting method formally with your next tax return would be one of the ways to do that. So definitely something I'd recommend that gets on your list in a conversation with your CPA. I think the other sort of broader tax created because of 280E, but broader from the business perspective is just restructuring of all of these corporate entities that we have around the cannabis touching entity, right? So management companies and real estate codes and all of these companies that have kind of are on the peripheral or ancillary to the plant touching entity that have been created to for whatever reason, right? But mostly to mitigate 280E. I think that's something to start looking at, is your entire legal entity structure. Which entities make sense now and tomorrow, and which ones don't, right? And where there could be some opportunity to slim down or just really hone in on your active business operations in advance of that potential reschedule or deschedule.
Yeah, and I think that businesses, outside of just looking at the numbers, businesses need to come together within your states, because if it is descheduled, there's going to be decisions and rules and regulations and laws that are going to probably change within your state. And so if you're not actively involved in what's going on and these decisions that are being made for your business, then it may not benefit you. So I've never been as into politics as I am now that I'm a cannabis accountant, but it's so important for us to be speaking to our regulators and helping them understand how their decisions are affecting our business, and helping them understand the pros and the cons to the different decisions to help them make better choices for you. Because if they're not operators, they're just voting, then they're not going to really know what's really going to move the needle for you as the operator.
That's a great point, Naomi. I mean, change happens at the policy level. By the time it gets enacted and in law, it's too late, right? That's it. That's what we have to follow. So I think that's a really, really important and great point for all of our listeners out there. Just really get involved. Again, policy is where we can make change, and ensuring that our regulators, our legislators understand our concerns and frankly, any opinions or feedback that we might have, I think is really important as we move down, again, these uncharted waters of rescheduling or descheduling.
I think too, you have to, I think some companies that could be struggling probably need to think about strategizing and looking internally at their operations to see perhaps where their challenges are, or where there might be holes in their controls or different things in their on the operational side of the business, because those are things you want to really clear up in moving forward. Because in essence, when the floodgate opens, and that is when cannabis is rescheduled, and perhaps more cash flow is available, you want to be prepared with the operational side, that you've got your ducks in a row so that you can move forward and strategize about growing your business.
I think we had that conversation mutually, Josephine, not long ago with a prospective client, and so I think that's definitely spot on. Businesses that have excess cash flow are looking to see what the next step is, how they continue to grow, and I think having that cash flow for maybe when the tree shakes and some things fall out, there's opportunity for acquisitions or mergers in this new world.
And you might have addressed it when my internet went down, so I apologize. But how do you both see the change affecting the social equity applicants and operators that are out there? I mean, how do you see what do you see as the impact for them?
Well, definitely, I think it will help with their cash flow. The only concern with social equity folks out there is they don't have access to as many resources as a large MSO would have. So having that attorney and that CPA and all those accounting professionals in a room for them to properly navigate this and map out two different avenues, with 280E, without 280E, what direction do we go depending on how things go? They may not have the resources in order to really do that. But if they are able to get rid of 280E, then I feel like it'll give them more cash flow. It'll give them more access to capital. It'll give them more access to different resources that are provided to regular businesses out there so that they can have a fighting chance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Josephine, because I certainly didn't want to step away from this conversation without bringing that aspect up. Recently, this issue was brought to light, and very specific thoughts on what rescheduling would have on this particular group of cannabis operators. And so the DPA and the Cannabis Regulator Association came out saying that rescheduling would fail to deliver on Biden's promise of cannabis reform. And frankly, anything short of descheduling would really cause additional havoc for social equity cannabis operators. Naomi, you rocked it in that they just don't have the money or infrastructure even to have all of the attorneys and CPAs and all of the professionals in the room to help them navigate what will be new waters. It's essentially going to be, I think, a new regime. And now we got to reactivate again and bring all of the education skills to this set of groups that is already challenged. So again, that article was published last week, and I think it's a pretty strong position that, frankly, again, anything short of descheduling has really rubbed this group the wrong way, or will rub this group the wrong way, and failed to deliver what was said.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I mean, think about a non-cannabis company, a startup, let's say, for instance. They have access to, even SBA lending. Where that's what the purpose of the Small Business Administration is, to help small companies get off the ground and operate. And so the industry itself doesn't have that. So if you're a social equity applicant, you're coming in and you're kind of trying to pull everything together, at the very least, it would be helpful if you could have access to some type of government loan program at a lower interest rate, perhaps, that could kind of get you moving and get your goals accomplished.
Or on the other side of that token, too, Josephine, funding programs specifically to help this group of folks to get the access to the professionals that they need, whether that's in capital or directly working with these professionals where the state is flipping the bill, right? But again, ultimately to give them the support they need to go through this process and come on the other side winners is the goal here. So yeah, great topic. I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm looking at our agenda, ladies. We've gone through quite a bit of questions and topics, and so I'd love to take a few questions from our audience. Oh, thank you for bringing this up. So Mike says, do you think over-aggressive 471C inventory cost absorption is going to be an issue if 280E is repealed for medical? Ooh. So I do think you're right, Mike, in the sense of the change in accounting method to see if anything else, if something changes where we would need to file that change in accounting method to account for it. But I couldn't tell you. I actually haven't seen court cases specific on the 471c tax position as of yet. We've not seen it so far. And I've not seen it either on audit. That's not to say they're not coming down the pike. The IRS got over 80 billion last year through the budget process, and 50 billion of that is going into enforcement. So more audits. But I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see what 471c looks like from a cannabis operator. From the taxation perspective, I'm not sure it quite matters if you're medical or adult use.
Yeah, and just from my background, because I've been doing a little bit of research into the 471c, so I've had conversations with other professionals. Nick Richards is one that comes to mind, and he is a cannabis tax attorney, and he says that he's been able to successfully argue 471c for several of his clients, so he's very bullish with using 471c. I've also had conversations directly with the IRS, and I invited them into my organization to speak to us and tell us how are they training their examiners when it comes to 471c. What are they looking for? What is there a percentage threshold of cost of goods sold that's going to be a trigger? How does that look? They didn't have a solid answer. Their response was just be reasonable. So you need to take reasonable deductions. So you need to make sure that your accountant and your team that's in place is documenting and supporting every single deduction and making sure that they can support the number and say that it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that statement in terms of reasonableness. That's the approach that we take at Indiva. It's not a one size fits all because every operator is different. And operating under different state regulations that impact costs for that particular business. But I think reasonableness is the key here. That can be defended on audit by your CPA, by the tax attorney, and frankly, by yourselves. If in fact, again, it feels right and it aligns with your business methodology of computing COGS.
Yeah, I mean, it's reasonableness and supportability is key, right? I mean, I work in a lot of litigation type work, forensically in cannabis space and in other industries as well. And what can we support? What can we trace? What can we support? Having a really tight documentation to support your position. You could argue it, two different professionals could argue the same thing, but I think with that support and thinking it through, I think that's the key is people tend not to think it all the way through. Think it all the way through so that it can be explained to, either a trier of fact in court or, to the IRS. And that's where your reasonableness comes in, when you're able to explain, think it through, and just logically come to a conclusion based on the support that you have.
Yeah. Thanks so much. So Fred says he's not clear or knowledgeable around Schedule 1, 2, and 3. Would you kindly briefly explain and define those schedules? And then would you kindly provide an example of P&L line items? So that P&L question, Fred, we'll take that offline. Feel free to drop in your email and we'll certainly get back to you just due to timing here. But I'm wondering.
I can take that if you'd like.
I'm sorry?
I can take that if you'd like the Schedule 1, 2, and 3 or.
Yeah, go ahead, Naomi. Feel free.
Yeah. So back in like the 70s or 80s, there's the Controlled Substances Act was enacted, and it puts drugs on schedules 1 through 5. And then the way that they determined where it fell on the schedule was based on the substance's medical use, potential for abuse, and safety and dependency liability. So how much are people abusing this? Is there any medical application? And so Schedule 1 is the most restrictive, meaning that the government believes that there is no medical application. It is highly abusive and the potential for dependency is highly likely. And on that schedule is where cannabis sits. LSD sits up there, a couple of ecstasy, a couple of other drugs sit up there. And then as you go further down the schedule, it gets less and there's actually a medical application. So as soon as you get to Schedule 2, there's drugs on that level that have a medical application, and the government feels like it's not highly addictive, you won't abuse it. But the drugs that fall in Schedule 2 are things like oxycodone, fentanyl, cocaine, meth, Adderall, Ritalin. So all the drugs that we know are highly abusive are there on Schedule 2. And then as you get down to Schedule 3, Schedule 4, and Schedule 5, like Schedule 3, you have Tylenol with codeine, ketamine, things like that, testosterone, and then, less and less. So that's how the drug scheduling is organized. And President Biden came out back in 2022 saying it's ridiculous that marijuana is Schedule 1. And that's when he charged the Health and Human Services Department to relook at the scheduling. And that's why we are here today.
That was a mouthful. You did wonderful. Yeah, great overview for all of our attendees on the CSA.
And I think it's important to note, as far as I understood, that even with rescheduling to 3, it doesn't mean that cannabis is FDA approved. So people are under that impression that, now we have an FDA approved. Well, no, I mean, to be FDA approved, you have to go through, a lot of trials, clinical trials and different things to get that approval. So it's not at that point yet.
That does touch on, I believe it's Callie's question here, Josephine. So again, how much tax relief are they actually going to get if it is rescheduled to a 3? And it's not FDA compliant, right? So would the 280E exception still apply if they're not FDA compliant? My take is yes. Again, if it comes down from Schedule 1 and 2, which is where 280E is applicable, then 280E wouldn't apply anymore. But this FDA compliant and regulatory process, that I think is going to be a whole nother world of nuance and application and processes that operators may have to go through if they want to be FDA compliant.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think the tax a part of it is affected by that. I think we'll still be relieved of the 280E issues, but who knows what that what's involved there. I mean, it costs a lot of money to run through clinical trials and things for the FDA to approve something. So, it's having the money to be able to do that. And then, quite honestly, I'm not sure where that leads us with respect to, prescriptions, or again, back to the pharmaceutical side of things. I'm not sure how that will impact all of that as well.
Yeah, great points. All right, I think we have time for one last question. Ooh, Rami. All right, let's see. When 280E is repealed, do you think it will be retroactive for retailers, specifically if there's an outstanding balance? So 280E itself will not be repealed, right? So what we're talking about is if cannabis gets rescheduled or descheduled, where 280E would no longer apply. So let's kind of work with that fact pattern. When it is enacted or becomes law, in terms of that reschedule or deschedule, is when the 280E will no longer apply. So generally speaking, Rami, I don't see much of any tax law that is retrospective. So most tax law is prospective. There's an enactment date and it's of that date going forward. I know I've gotten this question a lot in terms of, okay, well, what do I do with these back taxes, right? That I may have paid or have an outstanding liability on. And I do think that those will still apply. It kind of brings us back to TrueLeaf in that, at least on the practitioner side, we have some thoughts that they're being proactive, that's one of the main reasons that they filed the amended returns and these claim for refunds is to proactively go and get their money or some of their money that they've paid in anticipation of this, and they're going to fight it, right? That's essentially what I believe, anyways, the position they're putting themselves in is they may have some litigation, they may have some audits, but they're going to fight that. But again, coming back to your question, I think this is going to be prospective. We'll have to look to see when that date is, and again, further guidance around that. Hopefully they don't do something squirrely where it's, in the middle of the year. And we, as Naomi pointed out earlier, have to bifurcate, possibly 2 periods within our financial statements to take a tax position, but we'll see. It is the federal government. So they do not so many smart things at times. Well, that concludes this webinar. I want to thank Naomi and Josephine for taking some time out of their day and joining me on this webinar and having this amazing conversation. And then to all of the attendees that joined us today. Please keep following Indiva Advisors. We have our next webcast on April 12th. Well, we're going to be talking about the beneficial ownership regime and these new rules requiring small businesses to disclose ownership. So more to come on that. But Naomi, if you want to tell the great folks where they can follow you and where they can catch more of you, and then on to Josephine.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm the National Association of Cannabis Accounting and Tax Professionals. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Naomi Granger, nacatpros.org, or at NACAT, N-A-C-A-T, which is the acronym for my association. You can find me on socials with that, at NACATpros. I'll put it in the chat.
And thank you again for having me, Josephine Giordano with Beach Fleischman. I'm the National Cannabis Practice Leader there, and also a Senior Director in the Business Valuation and Financial Forensics Group. You can find me on LinkedIn, Josephine Giordano, or at www.beachfleischman.com.
Awesome. And again, you can find me on LinkedIn, follow our Indiva socials on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, if that's still a thing. Lastly, I did want to close out, again, in honor of International Women's Month. Thank you, ladies, for all of your contributions to the industry and to your clients.
Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.